I gotta make a TikTok about this.
Oh boy, I don't know. Lainey, what do you think about psychics?
Just like aliens, I want to believe, but at the same time, you're going to need some concrete evidence to prove it to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I know psychics have been brought into some criminal cases, but I don't, I really don't know. And there definitely are not aliens. Are you serious?
Often when tech things go wrong in the office, I'll joke around and say it's because Mercury's in retrograde. But all of that stuff seems a little crazy, and it's even weirder to bring it into the court case. I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
And on this episode of About the Law, we're going to be talking about how psychics have infiltrated the court system.
Well, I mean, I've heard of psychics, being brought into like a search or something like that. And I really don't know if they've really, I think there have been more successes when they've brought in the search dogs, and they can go out and find a cadaver or find a suspect that's running away. I guess, if the psychic can actually find something that can then be corroborated, it'll be all right. But there's actually, there's just so many sidebar stories that have nothing to do with the Brian Kohberger case, but they have like a tangential thread. So that's what we're going to talk about in this episode.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely, I think that things like psychics can be interesting and they can be healing to people on a personal level. But when it comes to the law and it comes to court cases, I think that's, not necessarily a safe space, a safe connection there.
This is the case of a psychic who we will see thought she had the Idaho 4 case all figured out. And just so people can see that, yes, this is an actual case in federal court in Idaho. It's Rebecca Scofield, who's a professor, versus Ashley Guillard, who is the psychic. So pending before the court is defendant Ashley Guillard's motion to set aside and dismiss the case. So the facts are right here that I've highlighted. This case arises out of the tragic murder of 4 University of Idaho students in November 2022. Plaintiff Rebecca Scofield is a professor at the University of Idaho. She alleges that she never met the students and was not involved with their murders in any way. Notwithstanding, plaintiff alleges that the defendant, Ashley Guillard, posted over 100 sensational TikTok videos falsely claiming that she had an inappropriate romantic affair. The professor had an inappropriate romantic affair with one of the victims and then ordered the murders to prevent the affair from coming to light. In turn, plaintiff initiated this action on December 21st of 2022, asserting 2 defamation claims against the defendant. One is premised upon false statements regarding plaintiff's involvement with the murders themselves. The other is premised upon false statements regarding plaintiff's romantic relationship with one of the murdered students. That's a mouthful, isn't it?
I'm just going to say I am really happy to see defamation, cases coming out of TikTok because a lot of people, everybody's presumption innocent until proven guilty, but there is a lot of garbage on TikTok. Everybody watching this knows for sure. Even if you don't have TikTok, you have heard of some of these ridiculous stories that come out of there. So good precedent, innocent till proven guilty, but
the thing that stands out to me, and we're only in the first page, this goes on and on and on, but the thing that stands out to me was that this psychic posted over 100 TikTok videos. Now, if she'd gone home and had an adult cocktail and, posted this out once, maybe we could forgive her, but 100 times? Doesn't that kind of tell you it's intentional, sort of, kind of, in a way?
I mean, in their defense, it's not like us where we sit and do, like an hour video, half-hour video where, you could presumably bust out 100 TikToks in the span of an hour. That being said, you are real, like you said, 100 videos is a lot. 100 videos is you are going deep into something. We have done how many, 5 points about Kohberger, and we are nowhere near 100. So
Well,
Yeah, hundreds
I think
excessive.
you made my point.
Yeah.
Even if it takes an hour, 100 of them. I mean, I think we've all. I'm not going to make any admissions, but everyone else in the world except for me have said a stupid thing when they've had an adult beverage or whatever, and they're sorry they did it. But to do it 100 times, I mean, give me a break. So let's go to the second page where. The psychic denied that she defamed the plaintiff because the accusations made against the plaintiff and defendant's TikTok videos are, she claims, substantially true. So she's doubling down on the accusations that she made. She maintains that she, quote, used her spiritual brain, intuition, spiritual practice, and investigative skills to uncover the truth regarding the murder of the 4 University of Idaho students and published her findings on her TikTok social media platform.
I mean, I can't bash her too much because I hope that her psychic findings find, millions of dollars in my future. So I don't want to fully hate on her, but I will also say that my psychic abilities also heighten after a drink or two. So, like, I get it.
Oh, okay. All you've been drinking today is water, so we're good. We're good. All right.
Me with my vodka.
Okay. So any attorney will tell you that maintaining jurisdiction in a federal court is a job and a half. It's not just as easy as filing some papers in a federal court and saying, okay, here we go. No. Federal courts are special. You've got to have 2 types of jurisdiction. You've got to have personal jurisdiction and subject matter jurisdiction. So having bored everybody in the audience and probably lost all of our viewers, this was kind of an interesting allegation that she said the court should dismiss this case, the defamation case against her, because the court does not have subject matter jurisdiction over the plausibility of spiritual practices. So
I kind of love that. It's just like she did it, she's guilty, but also don't come after me because you don't have jurisdiction over my spirituality, but also my spirituality is telling me that I'm right and that this person should be behind bars,
Well, now for the attorneys in our audience, I'm wondering, there are a lot of different courts. There's the district court, there's the local court, there's the federal court, there's the probate court, there's the workers' compensation court. I mean, if we get into the administrative tribunals, there's just so many. The bankruptcy court where I practice. What court would be appropriate in order to have spiritual psychic allegations? Do you have any insight on that?
I would say the court of public opinion.
Oh, okay. All right. I don't know where to file papers there. She also, the defendant questions the extent of the plaintiff's alleged severe mental distress. Well, I mean, so the professor at the college, is at this school where these horrible murders have taken place. It's international news, not just Idaho, not just the United States. Our friend over on the other side of the pond talks about this every day. So it's huge. It's huge, as they would say. And so I can understand. I mean, I'm not a big one on mental distress, but I mean, I can understand it in this case where the college professor is accused of being responsible for these 4 murders where there's not even a teeny tiny bit of evidence. But the psychic, who's the defendant, questions the extent of the plaintiff's alleged severe mental distress and relatedly how defendant could have even caused such injuries when it was plaintiff who killed the 4 University of Idaho students in the first instance, and nobody believed in the power of the tarot and psychic abilities anyway. So she's doubling down. She's not saying, okay, I was just having a bad day on TikTok. She's saying that, how could she have severe mental distress when she is the one that committed the crime?
Yeah.
I mean, really?
It's like, because we have no even court case for any of this, and I don't want to believe that anything's going to happen, but it would be the craziest wrench in the story if this random person actually did have involvement. All that being said, it is one of my worst fears to have like people on TikTok or like a YouTube documentary. Like, I mean, it's nice when we see YouTubers talking about us, but imagine someone going out and like complaining about, like, fortunately, we've only seen YouTubers say nice things about us. Shout out everybody who comments about us. But it's like, imagine someone making hundreds of hate videos of you, and then it's TikTok. So you have all these 13-year-olds also going and sending you hate emails because they have nothing better to do. It's crazy.
Well, you know what? It's one thing. We in one of our other episodes, we had talked about some of the some of the comments we get, most of which are good, but every now and then you get somebody that says, you're beating a dead horse. Or the person that just told me, now I know why I hate lawyers. But I mean, I'm a big boy. I've heard it all before. It wasn't anything I haven't heard before. Sorry. But I mean, to accuse someone with no evidence, no nothing, not even anything of doing this, and then doubling it down in a federal court piece of paper, I'm speechless. So I missed another little thing that we wanted to go over here. The psychic's TikTok videos accuse the plaintiff of not only having an improper relationship with a student, but then masterminding the murder of 4 students to keep that relationship a secret. Plaintiff alleges that these videos are defamatory and that she suffered actual injuries to her life, career, and mental health as a result. I've got to agree with the plaintiff. I mean, you gotta be tough and take it a little bit, but something like this, I mean,
it's feral. I can't even imagine that. I just like the idea of going about your day. I'm assuming that the professor isn't even like on social media or anything, and the fact that she would have found out that these videos exist means that people are sending them to her. It's just like going about your day, and then out of nowhere, the fact, I will say the fact that she's doubling down is, a little bit commendable. At least she's standing by what she said, but at the same time, this whole thing just sounds completely out of left field, completely crazy. There's no evidence except for vibes, basically.
This goes back to the very beginning. I've always, questioned. I try to be very down to earth, and I just, a psychic. Come on, give me a break. I mean, how can what's going to happen tomorrow, or what's, other than I'm going to get up and have breakfast and have my NutriBullet and all. How do you know what's going to happen, or how do you know what's happening in another planet, or how do you know? But to take it to this extreme, what is in somebody's mind that cooks this up? That this professor, who we have no evidence that she even knew this professor. What's in somebody's psyche that they cook up a scheme where a professor was having an affair with somebody she also didn't know, and then to cover it up, she murdered him? I don't understand the psychology of. Maybe we can get a psychologist on here. I've actually invited a psychologist. We'll hope he comes on.
Yeah, that is a good point too. Are these dreams? Is this happening while they're conscious?
Oh boy, I have no idea. Defendant, the whole internetosphere. I'm still looking for the right word. The whole electronic world out there is full of people that some of them are great people, but some of them are always disparaged for sitting in their mommy's basement and coming up with stuff. But this trumps that even. So now this is something that all civil procedure students in law school will appreciate. The defendant argues that the court does not have personal jurisdiction over her because she is a resident of Texas and her TikTok videos were published mostly in Texas.
I like the mostly.
So just to bring it down to a little bit of a legal analysis, which is, this takes a semester to do in law school, but to have personal jurisdiction from one state to the next, we'll say from Texas to the court here in Idaho, the person that lives in Texas has to have what's called minimum contacts with the state of Idaho. And they need to have reached out in some legal manner. Now, yes, I've just summarized, a semester worth of work, and there's a lot of case law that goes. I've actually argued jurisdiction cases in court, but to say that the court doesn't have jurisdiction because she's a resident of Texas and her TikTok videos were published mostly in Texas and accessed in several states. Wait a minute, you're the internet expert in this office. Since when does TikTok just stay in one state?
It's only in a couple states. It's Texas and like 3 other states.
Okay.
That case closed.
So like I always say, you've got to read the foot. A lot of people skip the footnotes. I think half of the fun of the case, or the meat of the case, is in the footnotes. And here's a footnote that explains that in the context of venue, however, she notes how she is a resident of Texas and the publishing of TikTok videos took place in Texas. Okay, so
court dismissed.
Yeah, so I guess we're doing this in my little town where I live. Does that mean that this podcast isn't going to go any further than my main street here in this town? Oh boy.
On our Kohberger video, the 30,000 views, all from Massachusetts, all from New Hampshire.
So here's the court kind of striking back and saying, oh, by the way, it is not required that a defendant be physically present or have physical contacts with a forum, so long as his efforts are purposefully directed towards forum residents. So where she posted over 100 TikTok videos, that's kind of crazy. In addition, these videos specifically accused plaintiff, a University of Idaho professor and resident of Idaho, of having an affair in Idaho with a University of Idaho student and then killing that student and 3 other University of Idaho students. I think she said Idaho 5 times in that sentence. So the court is making the point that, excuse me,
not Texas.
Right. So sure, you were sitting in your basement or whatever in Texas, but to argue that you're beyond the jurisdiction of the Idaho court in this particular case is just, it's not, they put hard stuff on the bar exam. This is not hard stuff. This is not hard stuff.
Well, if she even mentioned Idaho once in those videos, wouldn't that kind of counter everything she said if she ever said the word Idaho? Because then it's directed at the state.
If you want the short version on that, she could wiggle out of that if she wasn't, causing harm in another state and reaching out specifically to another state. I mean, excuse me, if she's just sitting in Texas and saying, I think people in Idaho are bums and their potatoes are rotten, arguably, there's no jurisdiction for that. I mean, because there's got to be something that's called purposeful availment. And I've kind of skipped over that in this memo. This memo goes very deep into that subject, but we want to retain the few viewers we have. So it is reasonable for this court to exercise jurisdiction over defendant. In this instance, as shown above, plaintiff sufficiently alleges that defendant purposefully injected herself into Idaho-specific matters through her repeated TikTok video. I think that answers your questions. Modern advances in communications and transportation have significantly reduced the burden of litigating in another. Oh, that was one of our other arguments, which was a valid argument, 50 years ago. Well, if I live in Texas, how can Idaho expect me to litigate in that court? Because, you have to go, you have to fly or drive or take a train up to, I don't know if there's any trains up to Idaho, but you've got to physically get yourself up to the court. You've got to crank out these papers and file them in person in the court or spend a ton of money on postage to send them. But all that stuff is gone now. We do Zoom hearings. During the pandemic, we did a lot of federal work on Zoom, except final trials. Even many final hearings were done on Zoom, and everything's filed electronically. So the court is saying, get a life. Modern advances in communications and transportation have significantly reduced the burden of litigating in another forum, which, that should be the kind of thing that is pretty obvious. But, then again, this whole case is not very obvious. I'm just skipping over a lot of legal stuff that if you, by the way, are a law student, or if you are, by the way, an attorney who is arguing a personal jurisdiction or venue case, this is great reading. For an attorney, this is great reading. But for people that just, want to get to the meat of it, not so much. So this court did not improperly judge the defendant's religious beliefs. So now we're saying that the psychic's religious beliefs are impinged upon, and she's saying that it's a First Amendment issue. But the court's like, defendant responded to plaintiff's defamation claims by going on the offensive, alleging that those claims, as well as statements made by the plaintiff's counsel to the media about those claims, were themselves defamatory and purposefully brought by the plaintiff and her counsel to systematically deprive the defendant of her constitutional rights to free speech and due process. And at the end of the paragraph, she's alleging that the defendant was trying to silence her clairvoyant insight. So I'm confused. I don't know whether she's a psychic or she reads tarot cards or clairvoyant. Are those things all the same? I don't even know.
Yeah, I would say that, I'm not a psychic expert, but I think clairvoyance and psychic are similar because clairvoyant, I'm going to have to do a quick search, but I thought clairvoyance was like knowing everything.
Well, let's get more deeply into all of
perceived.
this because some more important stuff is coming up here.
Yeah. So I guess it's just beyond like normal sensory contact.
Here,
So
okay.
a little related.
Here's my problem. If there were a case where they were looking for victims of, to be more serious, if there was a case where they were looking for more victims of the Long Island serial killer, and they brought in a psychic, and the psychic found the victims, I would say, okay,
Mm-hmm.
all right, okay,
Give us
but
some evidence.
right.
Yeah.
Or if there was a psychic who said, I know exactly what happened on the night of, January 1st, 2025, 21, we'll say. And then if there was some corroborative evidence that backed that up, I'd say, okay. But anyhow, so in this case, the defendant's intuitive abilities. So here they list the various abilities that she claims she has.
Oh, multiple. We have the skill list, skill tier list.
Yeah, the defendant's intuitive abilities, spiritual acuity, and investigative skills were not enough to allow the court to infer the existence of a plausible claim against the plaintiff. So the court's kind of making fun of her.
She didn't even mention the clairvoyance there. We have intuitive abilities, spiritual acuity.
I think the court is kind of making fun of her. They're saying, all these superhuman abilities that you have, and you're so much better than us and
The
higher than
vibes
us.
test.
You see things. Those aren't enough to allow us to even see that you have a plausible can't claim against the defendant. So I used a different color highlighter here because this is kind of important. The defendant takes issue with the court's analysis. So the psychic says the court's wrong. The psychic argues that because the court does not have subject matter jurisdiction over the plausibility of spiritual practices, its August 8th, 2023 memorandum decision and order is void. The psychic saying the court's wrong. The court intentionally erred in denouncing tarot readings and defendants' spiritual connection as a spiritual practice for the purpose of overstepping the separation of the church and state as required by federal laws and the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. So she's saying the court's wrong. I don't care what the court says. I'm right in the, and this is, you don't say the court's wrong. You don't say I'm right in the, first of all, you don't go in and be a psychic and say you don't have jurisdiction over me because I'm a psychic. But I mean, now, you don't. Again, I'm speechless. But all the times I've been in court, there have been a few times where I didn't agree with the court's decision, but you make a legal argument. You don't just come out and I think she's just trying to say, "Hey, court, you're an idiot." No, we don't.
The court just doesn't feel the vibes, The court just doesn't see what she sees.
But you don't.
We have no evidence, but
you don't just come right out and say that the court order is void. There is a procedure for an appeal, and there's an appellate process, and you can hire an attorney to argue pretty much any good faith case. But you don't just come right out and say, court, you're full of it. Now, no, I would highly recommend against that. Anyhow. So though courts generally construe pro se party filings liberally, what that means is, when somebody files on their own, they're a pro se litigant. And the courts, I have found, and it's very frustrating, if as an attorney, I'm up against someone who is pro se representing themselves, it can be very frustrating because, I don't want to say this and come off the wrong way, but we are trained to nuance things legally, and there are valid claims and there are claims that aren't so valid, but courts expect us to couch our arguments in valid forms. And the court is acknowledging here, we bend over backwards for you if you don't have an attorney, but we only go so far. But this is how the court said it. Though courts generally construe pro se party filings liberally, a court may dismiss as frivolous claims that are clearly baseless, a category encompassing allegations that are fanciful, fantastic, and delusional. And they cite a 1992 case. As those words suggest, a finding of factual frivolousness is appropriate when the facts alleged rise to the level of the irrational or wholly incredible. And they cite another case. The terms frivolous, when applied to a complaint, embraces not only the inarguable legal conclusion, but also the fanciful factual allegation. In this context, claims that are clearly baseless are not facially plausible. Here, defendant's counterclaims were supported. Now, what that means is the college professor had brought a suit against the psychic defendant. And not only did the defendant file a motion to dismiss it, she also brought some counterclaims saying, well, I'm right and you're wrong. Here, the psychic's counterclaims were supported only by her spiritual intuition. Well, as you can see up above, what you really need to do when you're making a point is cite some cases. See how the court, makes some statements, but then they cite cases. You can't make a statement in court and support it only with your spiritual intuition. Your Honor, I'm right and you're wrong because I just have a feeling. No, that
I have no evidence, just feelings.
That's not going to get you very far. Intuition, even if summoned by one's spirituality, does not make a legal claim plausible. Otherwise, there would be no standard against which such claims can be tested. Now, I'm not arguing that there's no such thing as intuition. Of course, people have intuition. I've known people that, have intuition, and they have, I don't know how to put it, but they have a sense of how things are going, and you can't really put it into words. I don't know. Am I describing intuition well or not?
Yeah, I think you are. It's just like it's the vibes. It's like a little bit better of a vibe check. Yeah.
And intuition is fine in our personal lives. I mean, I have a feeling that guy over there is not somebody that I want to be friends with. So I follow my intuition, but it's not something that you cite in a legal brief, especially when you're saying, hey, court, you're wrong and I'm right. But it's my spiritual intuition. Nuh-uh. So she's making some First Amendment arguments, which are, not really anything that anybody would take seriously. At bottom, claims must be based in fact, not conclusory and unverifiable beliefs. With this standard in mind, the court simply held that absent objectively verifiable factual allegations, the defendant's counterclaims were implausible. Nothing more, nothing left. So that's that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's the court's signature. Isn't that nice? Honorable Raymond E. Patricio, I think is how you pronounce that. I'm not sure, but so her attempt to dismiss the case failed, and her attempt to not have her counterclaims be dismissed also failed. So, I mean, what a nutty case.
It's, a good reminder to seek professional legal consultation when getting involved in the court system, I would say. I think that would be pretty helpful in this case, but it at least sounds like she's, and everybody innocent until proven guilty. But if this professor is innocent and has just been randomly attacked by this person online on TikTok, I'm glad that something's being done about it, because a lot of the times these websites and social media platforms aren't going to do anything about it. So it's nice that she's able to kind of take some control there, assuming her innocence.
Well, I appreciate you saying that people should get an attorney, and I agree with you 100%. In this case, there is a imperative that hangs over all attorneys, no matter what court they're in. But in the federal court, it comes under Rule 11. And Rule 11 says that we have a duty of good faith. We have a duty of making sure we have read everything, whether we wrote it or one of our paralegals or somebody who we work with. But we have a duty of good faith that everything that we say in a pleading is true. Can we argue things? Yes. Can we make arguments to change the law in good faith where the law doesn't exist in that particular area? Yes. In fact, it's our duty sometimes to do that. But it's all got to be in good faith. So she comes to an attorney and says, I want to tell this court that they're wrong and I'm right, and it's all because of my intuitive whatever.
Your vibes. Vibe check.
I'm wondering what attorney is going to want to take that case because A, I'm wondering if she'd really want to, retain the attorney, but B, I'm wondering, what attorney is going to want to write that garbage.
Mm-hmm. That is a good point too, that she might not even be able to find one, even if she did want one.
But you don't go into federal court and you don't go into a federal court, which is the big league, and start, writing stuff yourself. It will be kind of like me walking out into Yankee Stadium and,
What do you
picking up all cases.
you don't
I
mean you
wouldn't do
can't
it.
just chat GBT it? Chat GBT doesn't have all the answers. Are you kidding me?
Well,
People go to school for things like
I don't know if even Chat GBT would want to take this one. That's a good issue. That is a good question. That is something that the computer experts can tell us about. But
It turns out you ask ChatGPT, and the first thing ChatGPT says is, "I'm actually not authorized to give legal advice." Sometimes it'll tell you no.
now we're going down a rabbit hole I hadn't intended to go down. But I mean, doesn't the old phrase or the old construct that when they first came up with computers back a million years ago, that garbage in, garbage out? So even with Chat GBT, if you put all this garbage in, wouldn't just garbage come out?
Yeah, and that can be demonstrated pretty well too, because not that I would ever use ChatGPT to help me with my homework, but sometimes when you put in math problems in ChatGPT, it will a lot of the times, it's gotten better about answering correctly, but a lot of the times it'll just spit some garbage out at you, and then you look and it's just like, where did you get this value from? And you guys, it's a team effort and you work together to get the right answer. But not even ChatGPT at the end of the day, like you said, garbage in, garbage out. It's a language-based learning model that at the end of the day, it's just trying to have a conversation with you. It's not really gonna try to solve your problems. It's just gonna give you what it thinks you want to hear.
Do you remember that episode where it was a short actually, where I took a bunch of paper and put it in the blender, and the blender and it just spit out? That's all Chat GBT. I mean, sure, yeah, it's magic. It can think it's going to be sentient pretty soon and it's going to take over the world, but it's really it just takes a bunch of different stuff. I mean, it has hundreds of thousands of books that it has scanned into its phony little electronic brain, and it spits out those hundreds of thousands of books. But that is all it is. That is all it is. I mean, if you put into the Chat GBT, I'm going to bring it back to the subject here. If you put into Chat GBT that you're a psychic and you read the tarot cards and that you have all of these supernatural abilities, it's just going to spit out, rewritten stuff like that. And so it's still going to be gibberish as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. So now you asked if there are aliens. That's beyond the scope of this particular podcast. But I would say, I think we're crazy if we don't believe that there is some other life somewhere in the universe. But
Maybe the defendant can help us find it, because she seems to know a lot. So maybe she knows the planet.
That's a really good idea. So I don't know. I guess that we've taken this about as far as we can. It was just a crazy suit. I can't believe that people do the things they do. I mean, if this woman, really came up with this idea, I don't understand that even, but okay, she comes home and she thinks, and she's reading these newspaper headlines about this horrible, horrible, horrible case. How do you then name a professor and say, oh, it's her, and then come up with this crazy idea that, oh, she was having an affair with one of the students, and to cover it up, she killed 4 of them? What? Huh? How ab initio from the start? This just seems like lunacy. And then to put it on TikTok 100 times, I mean, you said, well, that's not unusual, but I don't know. If she put it on there once and then the next day said, oh, I had an adult beverage, I think people might be willing to forgive her. But come on now.
I gotta, there is just at the end of the day, there's just something about someone who will stand with such conviction that they're right and that this is right, even when presented with the court of law. There's just something I can't even imagine, one, making the 100 videos in the first place, and then two, just being I was right, I don't take it back, and you guys, you just don't have any jurisdiction over me because you don't have any jurisdiction over the spiritual world. Overall, it's wild. It's just completely wild. It's definitely impressive. It's definitely something, and this is no shade or hate to people who tarot readings and psychics and all of that other fun stuff, but definitely it makes sense how it happened, because the whole Idaho case, we can't believe it happened in the first place. So, it's not too far-fetched. I mean, we see our comments every day, all the different stories that people come up with. Um, but this is just a whole different universe.
It's a totally different universe. And speaking of the universe, it's so interesting that the underlying case that we're talking about has gotten so much attention worldwide. I mean, it's just hard for me to understand that and to see that, newspapers and podcasters and people all over the world are following the Kohberger case. And again, I've said this in previous episodes, and my opinion, and it's only my opinion, is that because there's been so much secrecy and because there was a 6-week delay between the crime and picking up a suspect, and because the court has issued a gag order, and because they're pushing the cameras out and saying we're going to do, because there's just been a really thick veil of secrecy over this case, that has backfired. And that's why so many people worldwide now have their eyes and their consciousnesses open to this whole thing, one of whom is our friend over on the other side of the pond, Mr. Harsh Reality. And he does some really good, he's not an attorney, but he's a really incisive, intelligent guy who really has thought out his positions on all of these things that are going on in the case. And I enjoy watching him because he's not legalistic. He's brilliant, and he has these, statements that really have a lot of perspective. That's the word I'm struggling for, is a lot of perspective. So when he had a live about a week before we were doing this podcast, he did a live, and I watched it. It was really interesting, and he was talking about a lot of different things. And he saw that I was lurking in the room. I had made some little comment, and he said, "Oh, there's the law office of Mr. Myers." And I'm not going to say I taunted him, but in a previous episode, he had talked about his feelings about fishing and playing golf, and I just thought it was so interesting. And as an attorney, I have an unusual view of golf, so I asked him to tell the people in his room about his feelings about golf and fishing. So here's Mr. Harsh across the pond acknowledging our presence and answering my questions.
You can't be messing about on this guy's hair, straighten your ties and all that. But yeah, fishing, yeah, I just can't do it. I can't do it. I used to when I was younger. Like I say, my uncle's got a fishing boat. Used to go out, used to do beach fishing and all sorts. Well, I just liked him, so I had to go if I wanted to spend time with him because he was a cool guy. But fishing, definitely not. I think I went. I think I got something. I think I got a hook stuck in my finger. That pretty much put me off. When you think that you get a fishing hook in your finger and you think you can pull it out, and then you're given the bad news that the hook's barbed and it don't actually work that way. Yeah, that made me like it even less. And golf, I just can't understand why you'd want to run up to a ball, smack it 300 yards, then walk after it again, get to it after about 10 minutes, and then smack it away again. There's just no real reward in that. Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew Myers. He's in here making us all stay straight, making us all dress nicely and behave. And yeah, it's nice chilling out with all of you. You are all absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much to Harsh for bringing us up and answering our silly little questions and mentioning our podcast on your show, and we really appreciate it. And everybody else too that has been so kind in sharing our show. And thank you, of course, to our first member, Laureen. So if you're watching this, thank you. Shout out. You're awesome. And thank you all the other podcasters, commenters, the Evil CJ show. Thank you for mentioning us as well. And just thank you, everybody, if you've made it this far into the video. We really appreciate you watching.
Yes, thank you very much. We appreciate all the attention. We appreciate all the comments, and we're going to start a feature in which we do read your comments at the end of the show from now on. We did it in our previous episode. We're not doing it today because we're right up against the clock here, but we'll do that in the future. So thank you very much. Please like and subscribe, and have a great day. You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions. And that's that.